Okay, welcome to week 3 of our online course, English 231. Just wanted to remind you again that I've updated the syllabus. I will be doing this every week with your assignments that are due this week. So you'll see that your readings that you have due this week is Digital Storytelling Chapter 2. You also need to watch Lost in Austin, Episode 1 only. There are 4 episodes, so only watch the first episode. It's about 40 minutes. And it's available on Hulu, Netflix, or YouTube. And also read this article, The Real Housewives of Jane Austen. I think you'll find it interesting. Additionally, your 3 assignments, there's going to be a quiz on Moodle on DS Chapter 2. I will be posting that probably tomorrow on Tuesday. And also you have 2 other assignments. One is to imagine yourself going through a normal day, but as if you lived in Sanditon, circa English 1817. And I want you to focus on the technology, that is the extensions, according to McLuhan's speak, that you would be using based on the details in the book and how they would change the scale, pace, or pattern of your day. So I really need you to do this assignment because we're going to keep coming back to McLuhan's theory. He is, after all, the seminal new media theorist out there in the field. And really be thinking about how we can see through stories, print stories, analog stories, as well as digital stories, the effect that technology has on all of our lives, not just the internet, because I want us to really dig deep into this idea of what is technology, what is new media, and how what is new media is always a moving target. And so the new media that we think of today will not be the new media in 40 years. So this exercise really does help us to think about technology broadly so that we can hone in more specifically on new media and digital storytelling as we progress throughout the semester. So this will be a link that I will put up on Moodle. And lastly, you do need to create a WordPress blog on this week's topics, discuss how 2 items, 2 for each of the assignments, change the scale, pace, or pattern of the characters in Lost in Austin. So 2 for Lost in Austin, and those mentioned in Real Housewives of Jane Austen. So 2 from that article as well. You will need to provide then links to your original commentary on WordPress in your weekly assignment of the link up there on Moodle. So just remember that each time you do a WordPress blog or a WordPress assignment, you need to work on the WordPress website as well as then revisit Moodle. There'll be a link under every week where you will provide a link back to the work that you did on the WordPress site, as well as write a few sentences, 3 to 5 sentences, where you discuss how the content that you contributed to the website helped you to better understand the assigned readings for that week. Okay? So again, be a quiz, there'll be a link on Moodle. And then there'll also be a link on Moodle for this assignment, the second assignment, as well as a third link on Moodle where you'll report back on what you accomplished on WordPress, as well as provide a link back to that page. It's very important that you provide a link back to the page that you worked on WordPress, or else I cannot grade your assignments. Okay? So don't fail to do that. All right, so for this week, I'm going to start off with talking about Digital Storytelling Chapter 2. One thing that I think is really interesting in that story is that there's 2 important allusions to literature in digital storytelling as well as in Sanditon to a name Lovelace. Now, I wanted to make sure that you understand the literary allusions and that you didn't get them confused. On page 22 in chapter 2, we get this little bit of interesting information about the daughter of Lord Byron, who was a famous British poet. He was known as being mad, bad, and dangerous to know, mostly because he allegedly slept with over 200 people during his lifetime, both men and women. But he only had 2 children, and one of them was Ada Lovelace, the Countess of Lovelace. And she is actually credited as being one of the very first computer programmers. Of course, computers didn't exist during her lifetime because she was only alive from 1815 to 1852, as explained in your textbook. But she was doing mathematics that were precursors to the kind of mathematical formulas which are referred to as algorithms that we use today in the computer. And so oftentimes people from our current history get sort of a lot of credit for, for example, inventing the Apple computer or the PC, the Bill Gates, the Steve Jobs. But there's a lot of women sprinkled throughout this history too, and Ada Lovelace was one of them. Now, you'll notice that in chapter 8 of Sanditon, Sir Edward, who is one of the main characters of the novel, fancies himself to be a Lovelace character. And he's not referring to Ada Lovelace. He's actually referring to this, what he would have been, another character in this novel called Clarissa. And the Lovelace in Clarissa was what's known as a rake. A rake is somebody who defiles or sleeps with women who are single and then leaves them, and basically, leaves these women in a time period where the only way you could really earn a livelihood is to marry a man, because women were specifically paid not enough to allow them to live a life as a single person. So Lovelace was somebody who would go around and ruin women, basically turn them into homeless people, into prostitutes, things like that, because they couldn't get married after he had slept with them. So the fact that Sir Edward sees himself as being a dangerous man, quite in the line of Lovelace's, tells us that Austen's novel was pretty much being set up to be kind of a racy novel before she ended up passing away and not finishing the novel. And so, again, the novel goes on to talk about how Sir Edward looks at Miss Heywood and feels like he's entitled to approach her. Shows that he's basically a player, right? He's somebody who goes around, woos women, sleeps with them, and then ditches them. And so he's not a really good character. You're going to want to pay attention to this little paragraph that I just spoke with you about, because it's going to be a question on your quiz for today. Or for this week, sorry. So moving on to more background on the internet. Basically, this chapter in digital storytelling is dedicated to kind of giving us a background on how digital technology has advanced over the time. And specifically, there's some good information in here about cyberspace, which basically is the space that where we all live, that doesn't really exist in a tangible way, but is on our computers. And so it's a space that doesn't exist in our physical world, but nevertheless in our virtual world, where we feel like we have this really strong identity, on our social media sites, or on the blogs that we read, or on the TV shows that we watch. Again, we don't own these things. We can't touch them, but we can watch them in the cyberspace that is conveyed through our computers. Now, there's some important information in here again about some jargon, some terminology that you're going to need to be familiar with in order to successfully navigate this course. First of all, they talk about URLs. And again, I want you to refer to the glossary in the back of your textbook. A URL is just simply this website address that you can find at the top of your browser for every web page that you visit. And URL stands for Uniform Resource Locator. So basically, it's just like an address to your home. Every time you want to go to a specific web page, you put your URL, your Uniform Resource Locator, in the address bar, and then it takes you to that website. Also talks about HTML and HTTP. So basically, HTML and HTTP are two different sets of rules by which our computers operate. Oops. And HTTP is Hypertext Transfer Protocol. So basically, it's this, again, the set of rules by which all of our digital information is conveyed over the internet. So protocol is used to transfer files, including text, sound, video, and graphics on the web. So every time you load a page, basically, it's every page is jumping through a series of hoops, and so that it can operate correctly and display the information that you want to access on your screen. And it knows what to do basically based on HTML. And HTML, again, we've been looking at that on the WordPress site, where this is known as hypertext markup language. It's its own kind of language that tells your computer what to do and how to act. Specifically, HTML is the software language used to create web pages and hyperlinks. And again, we can see that here when we switch from the visual tab to the HTML tab. And again, this is not just the alphabetic text that we're used to seeing. This is a really trimmed down version of, but an interesting nevertheless version of HTML that makes our computers run. So again, everything that's in between, oops, I just made a little mistake there, move some text. Everything that's between carets that you see on the HTML, that's an example of on the HTML tab, that's an example of HTML markup language, hypertext markup language. Okay, so another term in this chapter that's going to be important to us is incunabula, which incunabula, as you can see both from our textbook and from this definition I've produced here, it has multiple definitions. First, we have the extant copies of books produced in the earliest stages, before 1501, of printing from movable type. But incunabula, again, as different and new kinds of printing and media have emerged in how we tell stories, it has been broadened to embrace, the earliest stages or first traces of anything. And of course, we're in the very early stages of digital storytelling, and we're going to be looking at some examples of that. So the incunabula of digital storytelling. The web series Welcome to Sanditon, which is going to build off of the print text that you read of Sanditon by Jane Austen, as well as the web series The Guild. Now, again, one big thing about digital media is that much of what we see on the internet has been reproduced or repurposed from earlier kinds of storytelling. This is very, very common. In order to get the best experience out of digital storytelling, it's really important that you educate yourself on all the illusions or predecessors that came before the stories that we're seeing. And you can see that on page 29 in our textbook, Miller talks about the three different kinds of stages, usually, that the incunabula of a particular medium goes through when it's starting to begin its path towards becoming a robust medium for storytelling. So the first step is almost always repurposing, which is taking the materials from an earlier medium and just putting them wholesale into the new medium. We saw that, for example, with Sanditon. They just took this book and didn't do anything to it and just typed it up, stuck it on the internet. So this would be an example of repurposing a story from one medium, print, to another medium, digital. Then we have the adaptation approach, which is like a spin-off, or in other words, an established property like a novel that is modified somewhat for a new medium. And that's what we're going to see in Welcome to Sanditon. Welcome to Sanditon is a modern adaptation of Jane Austen's Sanditon. And so instead of being set in the early 19th century, I'm going to pause that. Instead of being set in the early 19th century, it's going to be moved to the 21st century, and it's going to be moved from Great Britain to America. It's going to be a lot more familiar to us. It takes kind of the broad brushstrokes of the story and then adapts it to a modern tale where we have women who are not trying to get married but are business associates and entrepreneurs and people who are having sort of friends with benefits relationships with each other, as opposed to looking solely for getting to get married, and people who are looking to earn a wage from an employer rather than to inherit it through the old system before capitalism. Okay, I'm going to pause here and start the next video because we're running out of time on this 15-minute length, and we'll talk to you soon.